G'day and welcome back to the Talking Leadership TV podcast series. Our guest today is Beth Berghan. She has extensive experience in management and senior executive positions, including faculty director at TAFE Queensland. She has a 20-year public sector career while concurrently owning 3 successful small businesses. She's a creative thinker and provocateur, uses powerful and thought-provoking questions to encourage others to explore different perspectives. A strong sense of self is reflected in the courage she's shown with clients, challenging and empowering individuals to initiate change within themselves, their teams, and their organisations. She's won numerous international awards, including being named amongst the 101 top global coaching leaders in 2019, the 101 most fabulous global coaching leaders 2020, and in February 2024, the global 100 most exemplary coaching leaders by the 32nd WHRD Congress. She is also a #1 international best-selling author. Beth regularly facilitates workshops to influence transformation in team communication strategies and behaviours. She insists on celebrating every single achievement, embedding successful behaviours and breeding further success. It was really great speaking to Beth, and our discussion focused on developing leaders and entrepreneurs. I hope you enjoyed today's podcast, but as always, enough from me. I'll hand over to today's guest, Beth Berghan. Beth, thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
My absolute pleasure to be here, Eric.
Beth, one of the topic areas that we talked about offline before agreeing to have this chat was around what area would be of interest to you, and we agreed on developing leaders and entrepreneurs. So, from a developing leaders and entrepreneurs sort of 101, what in your mind is the driving need to develop these human beings from your experience?
Well, I think, firstly, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I feel really privileged to be spending this time having a chat with you, and we've had some wonderful chats leading up to this. So yeah, it'll be interesting what happens today. um, why do I think that it's important to develop leaders and entrepreneurs? If you were to Google my leader is, or my manager is, and you know how when you put something into Google, it comes up with all sorts of um, predetermined, or the most, I'm not saying this very well, but it comes up with the most Googled or most asked questions. If you type in my manager is, the vast majority of stuff that you see there is negative. And what we know is that more people leave their jobs because of their leaders or managers than for any other reason. So often the leader is the person who sets the tone, who sets the culture. And so from my perspective, what I discover is that people are put into leadership roles for all sorts of reasons. And some of those reasons come down to we need to make an allocation against gender, we need to make an allocation against age, we need to make an allocation. You know, we have all of those things that are sitting around why people are shifted to roles. Some people are really awesome at demonstrating how articulate they are in an interview or a recruitment situation, and others aren't. Just because you can talk doesn't mean you're a fabulous leader. And so what I'm aware of, and what I come across all the time with my coaching clients is that to learn that skill of managing their communication, starting with the way that they're communicating with themselves. So their own self-talk is really important, but the whole way that they're leading out there, so that they start with leading themselves, they move on to leading others, they might then move to leading leaders, they may be leading a process in an organization and need to really drive that process through. So that might be less about people, They then may go on to lead the organization or the business. Now, at this point, I'm talking more about leaders and entrepreneurs. I'll come back to entrepreneurs. People don't, not enough of us understand, Eric, that that process of leading is actually a whole lot about managing the people. And if we don't have that communication skill set or the ability to observe what's going on with people, our best resource goes out the window. We can't bring our people with us, then we're really not leading. And if you can't communicate really well, your leadership is likely to be limited. You may still be doing okay at leading, but you could be exceptional if you would start to bring some of those things together. So in the work I do, I refer to that as leadership intelligence, learning all of those different nuances about the dance involved in whatever your particular organization or business does. When it comes down to entrepreneurs are really awesome at taking those early risks or backing themselves for an idea that they have. They're really awesome from that self-leadership perspective of being able to identify that the failure hasn't actually been a failure. It's a huge lesson for them. And they can be really good at looking at that lesson and taking out of it what they can learn from to keep on moving forward. Where our entrepreneurs, and I'll come back a step, often people don't need training to have that approach. They're ideas people. They see a possibility and they grab it. Where those people need training is around well, how do I scale this? I need some more staff. I'll bring some more staff on. They need training around letting go of that foundational stuff, the foundational things. Oh, but I've always done this. That's okay. Someone else is doing it now. Let it go and move out to that frontier. Move out there and be chasing it. Chasing those ideas and chasing those possibilities all over again. As an aside, Eric, I don't think that we do enough in our education system to encourage people to be bold, to be brave, and to actually get out there and have the balls to test out an idea as an entrepreneur.
Irrespective of whether you're in a leadership position or you're an entrepreneur, you set the tone and the culture for
Yeah.
the places in which you work. And I have come over the last 5 years in having discussions with good people like yourself around what does leadership mean? What does it look like? What does it feel like? I think there are some significant sayings between leaders and entrepreneurs, but there are some qualitatively very different things between those two groups of human beings that
Yep.
necessitate different levels of intervention, and development if they're going to be, and using your words, exceptional, if that's what they're aiming to be. The question around what is exceptional, what is good, and what is mediocre. I haven't had too many of those conversations because I think those judgments sometimes can be very subjective. I'm now
Yep.
more of the mind. Put yourself in that person's shoes, and could you do any better? What would you have done different? You're either going to make a mistake or you're going to get
Yep.
through it, and you'll learn from both. One particularly interesting bit of information you shared, and it's something I'm a big believer in too, is that it's not that schools predominantly don't want to teach or don't want to instruct around taking risks and going down an entrepreneurial pathway. It's not part of the system in which schools operate. So, and I've had these discussions with other guests, and I'm having these discussions with my own sons around and I've asked them the question, what did you think your pathways were at school? uni, TAFE, or go into a job. I said, well, what about starting your own business or being independently employed? And they're like, oh, that's nothing we really thought about or even as an opportunity because it's not something that's often discussed. And so um, the idea and attention, I think, and you bring this up quite nicely around, or should schools do it? I think if we take one step back, if we could, is the question around, and I'm talking about entrepreneurs here, sorry, can you teach someone to be an entrepreneur or are they born that way? Is this a skill that can be taught or is it does this lie somewhere in the middle there that you can identify those natural born entrepreneurs and then you can maybe bring the entrepreneur out of a human being that didn't know they had that as part of their DNA. But um, I think there's something in that, and schools are so pressed to get their curriculum taught that it maybe it's not the right environment, or maybe there's an opportunity for the entrepreneurs that might be listening to this. And I know it already happens, but maybe we need schools that are set up to help young people build businesses to give them those skill sets very young, and that's a
Yep.
huge
We have
different
surf
discussion.
schools, we have
Yeah.
soccer schools, we have
Yes.
science schools, we have art
Yep.
schools. When we talk about business, I love that idea, Eric. As you can see, I'm going, let me talk, let me
Yeah.
talk.
Go for it. Go for it.
um, when we talk about a business school or we look at business subjects, like it used to be that if you did business years ago, you were learning how to touch type and how to write financial records. It was a more administrative role. When we talk about it now, if you're getting a diploma in business or a degree in business, it's very theoretical and it's following a whole lot of established models for how you might do things, this is what happened in those days. Unfortunately, and I was raised by two teachers. I started my career as a high school teacher. Really small, safe world. A really small, safe world, and often a lot of their friends are school teachers as well, and so their experience with business or entrepreneurialism isn't necessarily a vast one. And as you would know, it's really hard to teach something if you haven't experienced it yourself, if you're not passionate about it yourself, if you haven't done it. How do you talk about the challenges of establishing your own business? Um, if you just can't even imagine doing it except out of a textbook, um, because you haven't felt the feels, you don't know what it's like. Um, I think that um, many of us are born as with a tendency to take more risks or to be more open to uncertainty than others are. And so it then depends on whether you have the motivation, whether you're inspired, whether you are encouraged, whatever the words might be at that stage of your life, to actually establish something and give it a go. Because if we've been raised by people who've only ever gone to work for someone else their whole lives, they don't always see that this is safe. They don't always give you the encouragement that you might want or need. And so I think that it's there. I do also believe that in the right environment, it can certainly be brought out in people. And, my statement about teachers, it's a safe and it's a small world, is a very generic kind of statement.
Sure.
And
Sure.
and there are individuals in there who are doing absolutely great work. The major difference, again, a generic kind of statement, the major difference between TAFEs and universities is that TAFE has a requirement that you've got that industry experience. You have to have gone out there. And, when I was a faculty director in the TAFE environment, I had to find people, employ people who had recent industry experience. If they'd been with me for too long, I had to send them out to industry. That same thing doesn't resonate, or doesn't apply rather, in the same way in the university sector. So one's quite practical and one's quite theoretical. Is TAFE the best place to learn it? Not necessarily, because you bring, when you move into any of those education systems, there's a framework that overlays everything that you're going to do. No, it's more about a private RTO being able to develop something that is going to really get legs.
Yeah, but 100%. So, in developing leaders, and in my case, for what this is worth, I found a lot of value in a leadership course that a previous boss of mine put me on. He thought I had the chops to do it. I did the course over a year period with some other people across an industry I used to work in, and at the time it suited me and it didn't suit some of my colleagues because it was uh, um, sessional session, 3 sessions over the year. You had to go out of your home state and to somewhere else to do some coursework and some face-to-face work on some skill sets. And at the time, that suited me because that's the way I like to learn. But that suited me, may not have suited some of my colleagues. And it was maybe 5, 6, 7, 10 years after I did that bit of work that I understood why that was delivered in the way that it was delivered, because the people delivering the material had experience of industry that I didn't. And
Yeah.
and I'm forever grateful to those people for the lessons that they imparted, even though at the time I didn't quite understand what the bigger linkage was. But I don't assume to presume that you couldn't get that at TAFE or university, but they're not built for that. They're built to deliver certain
Yeah.
curriculum,
So
yeah,
it's more about having additional projects, like,
yeah,
some of the universities have an incubator, and an incubator, and there have been some fantastic businesses that have come because someone is walking and working beside them. They've got advice about their financials the whole way through. They've got advice about scaling. They've got advice about how they can test that idea and put it out in the market. They've got advice about who they could go to develop a prototype or to take it to the next level. Or, there are all of those opportunities that are there. They're quite different from the person who might decide that they've got a unique idea here that appears much smaller initially than some of those big IT or software orientated ideas, which seems to be often what incubators get into. And so there are all of those things. One of the things that I really applaud that happens here, I live on the Sunshine Coast, is that we have, and now, of course, now that I'm telling you about it, I can't remember what it's called. It's a program that was started by Ted O'Brien, who is the federal minister for this area. And it's been going for, I don't know, more than 8 or 9 years, and he gets mentors and young people come in with ideas, with these entrepreneurial ideas. So it's called Young Innovators, or something like that. I apologize, Ted, that I can't remember what it's called. And from what I've read and heard about that, the people that they have to build their idea with support, and they're learning all of those skills, and then they are awarded 20,000 or something at the end to actually take that idea through. And what I love about that is that it brings that out in people. They have, sometimes it's as simple as providing a pathway where the entrepreneur or the leader can see, here is where I can go to grow my skills. Because, like, I personally believe that every single one of us can lead from any chair that we're sitting on. We don't need to wait for the title. We don't need to wait for some title. We just need to demonstrate that we have the capacity to lead. And
Yeah,
sometimes that's just about speaking up, isn't it? Sometimes
100%
it's about
agree.
telling the truth. Sometimes it's about getting to work on time. Sometimes it's about just being a modeling for other people to follow. Now, we could then argue that every single one of us likely has that spark of entrepreneur in us as well. We just haven't had the match, it hasn't been lit.
Yeah, sure. I've often thought of that. I think for some, that the spark of entrepreneurial um, effort and having entrepreneurial traits is the best you'll get out of some people. That in a situation you'll apply that who gives a crap about the risk thinking, and you go ahead and you take that risk. I think for me, this is a me thing, not anyone else's thing. For me, the true entrepreneur is the person that goes out and makes something work, or sees that need in a market, whether it's for a service or a good, fails and then starts again, and fails and starts
Yeah,
again, and just keeps. They're the kind of ideas person that is constantly bombarded with, well, what's the next big idea, what's the next big thing,
yeah.
and they tend to keep moving forward that way. I think where the interesting delineation is between the entrepreneur and the leader, a CEO or general manager or a mid-level manager, is they want to grow that first idea or that first business that's set up, and the entrepreneur wants to move on to, well, what's next, and that need to keep going and keep expanding on those ideas, I think, is a key difference. And this conversation to this point, which I told you this would be an interesting discussion we're having, is that foundational chat around, well, what's that pool of which leaders and entrepreneurs may come from. Now, in terms of a challenge, and here's one I'll throw at you, and it's a topic that I like discussing, even though a lot of people don't, because they want to forget, is what happened through COVID and then post COVID when it came to challenges facing leaders and entrepreneurs. So I'll ask you from the post COVID perspective, maybe with a leader first and an entrepreneur second, what lessons do you think were drawn for leaders and entrepreneurs post COVID from what you've observed?
Not enough. I think that for many leaders, and yeah, talk about entrepreneurs in a minute. For many leaders, I think um, they were they were um, ill ill informed and ill supported in terms of what they wanted to do. Suddenly, people were working from home, and I always joke about that as being, we had this whole thing going on for a lot of years about, do we want people to work from home, and then bang, we're all in a petri dish, and the world's biggest work from home experiment is fully underway. And wasn't it interesting that we simply made it work? Um, the thing, the thing that I think we lacked was a skill set around how do we manage people remotely, how do we lead people remotely, and how can we best support them, um, and support their um, their mental fitness, their emotional fitness, their physical fitness. How can we best support that when they're in a different situation and we're still expecting that they're going to get this work done? I think it was horrific for many leaders to have to put people off. I think that came really quickly. I think when people were expected to put their staff off because the government had made decisions that were out of their control. That was very, very difficult for a lot of leaders. So they kind of got slammed into a situation that I don't know that yeah, it really, for me, the whole thing wasn't particularly handled very well. When we look at it now and we look back, we still haven't determined, although there's been a lot more testing going on, we still haven't determined what are the benefits of having people working from home versus working in the office. What are the benefits of a 4-day week as opposed to a 5-day week? There's been all around the world, there have been little pockets of experiments going on with that. Um, I think that the challenge that exists for leaders is that somehow during that whole COVID pandemic, the thinking of many of our employees shifted to be, well, if I can work from home and it can be really cruisy and no one's actually watching me and my productivity doesn't have to be high, if I can skive off, why not? I'll keep pushing to work from home. Not everybody, but some people shifted to or at least 30% shifted to that space. And so now we've kind of got this or push and pull, where leaders and organisations want people back in the office. Some of the people don't want to be back in the office. And so, I'm not sure that either party came out of it all that well.
I have struggled with thinking what's the washout of this. And one thing I'm sure of out of that process was that I think we were all unprepared for what it meant. And once it hit, anyone that claims they knew how to deal with it well, I think is either deluding themselves or
Yep.
is outright lying.
No rule book. There was no
Yeah, no,
manual.
no, 100%. And I agree with you to some extent around what people did in terms of the choice of how they wanted to work. What I think was a positive out of this, and I know when you're presenting it, it's more, hey, there's still more discussion here, and I agree with you. The bit that I liked out of the process is that people were now thinking, what does my role mean to me, and how is it best delivered for the organization? And that chat often was a one-way street between the person employing you, um, saying, yes, we'll give you some latitude with how you engage with work. But I think COVID smashed that door open and said, this is now a must when you're dealing with potential new employees, that you have to think about how flexible can you be in terms of the delivery of the work that's required. Now that's nuanced in that if say you're a nurse practitioner or a teacher, there are some things that you can't just do online or from home that you need to be face to face to do it. And there's no
Yep.
amount of engineering in the job that can change it. But for a lot of white collar jobs, the kind of roles that I've had in the past, I can work from home till I retire and I could still get the work done without the need to have that structured. You must be in an office 5 days a week. But that's not that's one part of the world I've worked in. There's the others where you're talking about service delivery, retail, hospitality, manufacturing, where you've got to be where the work
Got
is
to be on the
happening.
ground. Yep.
Oh, excuse me, 100%. So your analysis is interesting. What is even more interesting to a leadership tragic like myself is, what are the research projects going on to actually show the efficacy of these models of work and whether or not they're actually going to be beneficial? Because as much as it's about your teams, it's also about, if you're providing a place of work, you're not there necessarily to have fun all of
It's
the day.
about the
You're
business.
there to do a
Yep.
job, and
Yep.
you're not there for free. You're not giving your time
Yep.
voluntarily. You're being paid to do a job. So that tension around how much latitude can somebody have versus a delivery of the work that needs to be done is still a discussion worth having, but it's not, excuse me, it's not solely about what's in it for the potential employee. Um,
No. And this is where I think things have
and you
shifted.
brought
I
you brought that
think,
up really strongly. And
uh,
just to finish the point, because I know where you might go with this, is I also think too that the days are slowly going to go away where people are saying, well, I'm shopping around for the career that I want. You know what? There are employers that are getting clued on to the people that want these things, maybe not for the best of reasons. And they're going to wait for people like you and say, you know what? We could use you, but I'd rather go for the other 10 that apply that aren't pushing me to do something that I'm not
yes,
comfortable with. So the
yeah,
pendulum will swing the other way very soon,
yeah.
if it's not already
Yeah,
happening
I
now.
think it
So
started to shift back, Eric,
yeah,
and that's where, as you imagined, that's where I was going to go next. That actually immediately post COVID, we remember like that there were jobs and we couldn't find people for the jobs. And everyone was saying, employers, you have to change what you're doing because no one will come and work with you unless you have this list of long things that you meet. And now we're moving back to that. Hey, actually, when I'm employing you, it needs to suit my business and it needs to suit all of us, not just one or two people on the team. And so that takes it. There's a in the clients that I work with, Eric, that takes a shift in their minds as well. You know, how are you measuring people? If you want to give a 9-day fortnight or a 4-day week, but you still want to pay the same money, how are you measuring them? Are you measuring them on the time they sit at their seat, or are you measuring them on their productivity? And one is much, much, much easier to measure than the other one. And suddenly we're putting trackers in people's cars or on their computers to see where they're logging on and logging off. And some of that feels really uncomfortable for a lot of people because they want to trust their staff. But as you rightly said, uh, we're catching on to some of the demands of people. Let's finish up with that one and move across to entrepreneurs. What do I think entrepreneurs came out of COVID? Um, I think that smart people, entrepreneurs, smart people, people in business, if they pivoted fast, then they had more chance of coming out of it doing okay. If they weren't prepared to pivot fast, and they leaned back. And unfortunately, the government did this, but thinking they were supporting. In my mind, the government kind of doubled lots of payments and said, here, we'll give you this, we'll give you that. They actually made it easy for some people to lean back and go, oh, well, this won't go on for very long. We'll be okay. And it went on and it went on. We had the great toilet paper rush and all those kinds of things. It went on and it went on. And if you were not prepared to be innovative, if you weren't prepared to pivot, then you lost your place. And I would often say to people, innovate or evaporate. Like you have to be prepared to innovate. And that was happening all around us. So I think the saddest thing, was that small, so many people who were prepared to establish small businesses around food and hospitality, they got wiped out. And we're still seeing a lot of food places that are being, a lot of restaurants, a lot of hotels are closing because of the costs associated not only with staff but also the rising prices with the basic ingredients that they require to provide their service. Um, so I think that for some people, they rose to the challenge, and it's that whole, the survival of the fittest was really what happened. And there were many who got bigger. There were some who maintained, and there were others who just thought, you know what, I've actually been, it hasn't been a business, it's really just been a bit of a hobby. I'm going to stop now because COVID provided them with that reason to do that.
Again, the entrepreneurial take is an interesting one. I don't often hear people use the word pivot, but that in that context, but it's exactly what you're talking about. If you're ready to shift as you need to deal with the issues as they change, then yeah, you're more likely to have survived it. I have a feeling, much like leaders, entrepreneurs were stunned by what was going
Yep.
on, and in markets where access to capital and access to finance, I guess, and to put it another way, was made a lot more difficult when people were going, you know what, I'm not going to invest my money anywhere. I'm just going to keep it doing something in a savings
Yep.
account, or a term deposit, or I'm going to invest it in the big your super funds and so on, and let them do the worrying. Yeah, I
Mm,
think capital flows were an issue, and a previous guest discussed that the thing that the entrepreneurs in the world need is access to capital, and
yes.
that those things can be difficult to get, and with the economy doing what it did post COVID and things becoming more expensive, people get a lot more choosy about where they put that
Well,
investment dollar.
I think our entrepreneurs got a little bit risk averse as well. And
Okay, okay.
while we need realism, while we need people to be able to identify what um, can or might go wrong, we also need them to be focused on what can and will go right
Yeah.
in terms of where they are with their idea. And so, I think that for lots of budding entrepreneurs who perhaps saw more failure around them, suddenly, no, no, maybe we'll just wait, maybe we'll see. Um, Whereas for others, it would have presented a really fabulous opportunity. I think that the thing too about often with entrepreneurial stories, Eric, we don't hear about the little guys. Don't hear about the little guys so much. We hear a lot about Bezos or Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or various others that are massive. And in Australia, we don't necessarily hear those really that hey, here's a little entrepreneur who's doing these things here, and um, they're achieving success and making a real difference into the idea that they've built up. We often hear about the really big tech guys, and we've got a couple of those here in Australia who are worth millions and millions of dollars, but we don't necessarily hear about those successes, because success means different things to each of us as an entrepreneur. For some people, success, well, if I can't be Jeff Bezos, I don't want to be anybody. And they, that there's such a huge gap between where they are now and where he is, that's easier for them not to try. What can we do to actually get more of those success stories out there?
Yeah, agreed. Would we all want to be like Jeff Bezos? Not really, not myself. But look, for in terms of looking into the future, into that, what do you call it, the crystal ball of what might happen in the future. Give me a sense of the key leadership challenge coming in the next 12 months and the key entrepreneurial challenge that you see coming in the next 12 months?
Well, I can talk about both of them at the same time. I think for all of us, the ability to be the best communicator we can be is what the challenge will be. And this isn't necessarily about sending out the most articulate email or doing the most persuasive marketing. It's actually about communicating and connecting with people. So if we're the leader, we want to be able to connect with our team so that we're bringing them on the journey of where we're going. We're developing autonomy for them. We're empowering them. We're making sure that our people want to be at work and that we've got an awesome culture. We're supporting them, but we're also supporting our business. So we're together. We're on a journey together. Our leaders need to be able to have those tricky conversations before they get too tough. They need to have the courage to be prepared to change and grow themselves so that they don't become static in where their leadership is. Because in order to be responsive to whatever is going on in the world around them, they've got to be open to that possibility of self-reflection and growth. From the entrepreneurial point of view, they need to be communicating to ask for assistance to find out where is the capital going to come from, where are there new markets, who do they need to bring on board to be able to support the growth of their business. If they bring on someone who's just like them, does that support the business or does it keep it where it is? They've got to have that ability to step back and communicate with themselves through self-reflection to determine, are they actually the bottleneck in this business? And what do they need to do to be able to um, lean back or lean out or lean in, whichever leaning it's going to be, to be able to grow something that may actually grow better if they don't have their hands quite so much in the mixture. Like, making scones or bread, you're doing a lot of kneading. As an entrepreneur, sometimes you've got to step back from that. So for me, it's about communication.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Beth, this was an awesome conversation. Thank you for your time today.
A pleasure.